The Critique of Pure Reason is one of the most important works in the entire history of philosophy, and it set the stage for practically all work that followed it. Its goal is to develop the foundations of a comprehensive philosophical science, which Kant sets out to achieve through a rigorous analysis of the capacity of human reason in comprehending reality. Kant's system is founded on the identification of a previously unconsidered type of rational judgment. That is to say, before Kant, all knowledge was thought to be either empirical, concerning matters of fact, or logical, concerning relations of ideas. Logical knowledge was referred to as a priori, meaning that which comes before experience. However, Kant recognized that not all a priori knowledge is logical or analytic. Intuitive yet non-empirical synthetic knowledge is also possible and necessary for any science, and so Kant's system depends on his ability to show that synthetic a priori knowledge can provide the first principles of a true science of metaphysics. The following video contains an abridgment of Kant's own introductions to his system. Kant provided an entirely new introduction in the second edition of the work, which removed some of the prior obscurities. Both introductions are provided in this video. Preface to the first edition. Human reason is burdened with questions it can neither dismiss nor answer. Reason looks for principles that go beyond all possible use in experience, leading to obscurity and contradictions. Metaphysics, the battlefield of these controversies, is despised in modern times. Indifferentism, occurring amid the flourishing of all sciences, is a phenomenon deserving our attention and reflection. The critique of pure reason is necessary for reason to secure its rightful place, but also to dismiss all its groundless pretensions. Our age is criticized for superficial thinking, despite our mathematics and physics. Our age is the age of criticism, from which religion and legislation are not exempt. A critique of reason in general is necessary to determine the possibility and boundaries of metaphysics. I have succeeded in removing errors and answering metaphysical questions comprehensively. This claim may seem pretentious, but it is more moderate than those of authors who extend human cognition beyond possible experience. My investigation focuses on reason itself, and its simple acts can be systematically enumerated. Preface to the second edition. A science can be judged by its success. If it gets stuck or lacks unanimity, it is not secure. Logic has been secure since Aristotle, with few improvements. It presents and proves only the formal rules of thinking, and deals with nothing but its own form. On the other hand, reason must deal with objects, making it harder to study than logic. Pure reason must be studied on its own, without mixing it with other sources of knowledge. Mathematics, unlike logic, had a difficult time finding a secure path towards becoming a science, and natural science took even longer. Yet metaphysics is a type of speculative reasoning that tries to comprehend reality using abstract concepts rather than experiences. It has not become a science because it has not been able to produce consistent results, and different thinkers have conflicting views. However, metaphysics is essential because it is concerned with fundamental questions about the world. To improve metaphysics, we should consider that our cognition may shape the way we perceive objects instead of the other way around. If we assume that objects conform to our cognitive structures, we can form concepts that will help us understand them. However, this method will only work when we are dealing with objects that we can experience, and not when we try to reason about things that we cannot experience. This experiment allows metaphysics to explain cognition and the laws of nature, but shows that our cognition of things in themselves is limited, such that the unconditioned can only be thought of as a transcendent concept. The method of studying pure reason involves seeking elements that can be confirmed or refuted through experimentation. However, when propositions go beyond the boundaries of possible experience, they cannot be tested through experimentation. This introduction proposes a new way of thinking to transform metaphysics. The critique limits speculative reason and proves that space, time, and understanding are conditions for the existence of appearances, not things in themselves. That is, we can only have knowledge of objects as appearances, and cannot know them as things in themselves. Without this distinction, we would fall into contradictions, such as the idea of a human soul being both free and subject to natural necessity. The principle of causality applies only to objects of experience, not to things in themselves. Therefore, the same will can be thought of as subject to the law of nature in appearance, and free as belonging to a thing in itself, without contradiction. Although I cannot know my soul through reason or observation, I can still think about freedom as long as I understand the distinction between sensible and intellectual representation. If freedom were impossible to think, morality would have to yield to the mechanism of nature. The critical principles of pure reason teach us our unavoidable ignorance and limit what we can know theoretically to mere appearances. We must deny knowledge to make room for faith, as the dogmatism of metaphysics conflicts with morality. Introduction to the first edition. A priori cognitions are clear and certain for themselves, while empirical cognitions are borrowed from experience. Certain cognitions go beyond experience and are more significant than anything the understanding can learn in the field of appearances. When we abandon the realm of experience, it seems natural to investigate the foundation of our a priori cognitions before building upon them. Reason analyzes concepts we already have, yielding real a priori cognitions, but it also surreptitiously makes assertions of quite another sort. It is important to distinguish between these two kinds of cognition from the outset. Judgments can be either analytic or synthetic. Analytic judgments connect the predicate to the subject through identity, while synthetic judgments connect the predicate to the subject without identity. Analytic judgments clarify concepts by breaking them into their component parts, while synthetic judgments amplify concepts by connecting them with other concepts. In synthetic empirical judgments, the understanding depends on the experience of the object, but in synthetic a priori judgments, there is no help from experience. The concept of cause, for example, is not contained in the concept of something that happens, so how do we connect the two? Synthetic principles are necessary for speculative a priori cognition, which aims to create such new ideas. An investigation into the principles of synthetic a priori judgment is therefore the starting point of a system of pure reason. A science of pure reason would serve to critique and purify reason, but not to amplify it. Transcendental philosophy is a system of a priori concepts of objects in general. The investigation into the principles of synthetic a priori judgment is a preparation for a system of pure reason. The critique of pure reason outlines the idea of transcendental philosophy, which is a system of the a priori concepts of all objects, and of pure speculative reason. Anything practical, empirical, or moral is not a part of transcendental philosophy. The science of pure reason is divided into a systematic presentation of concepts, or elements, and a methodology. Human cognition has two stems, sensibility and understanding, which may have a common root. The transcendental doctrine of sensibility belongs to the first part of the science of elements, as the conditions for the potential objects of human cognition precede those under which those objects are thought. Introduction to the second edition. All cognition begins with experience, as objects stimulate our senses to produce representations. However, cognition may also add to the raw material of sensible impressions, and pure a priori cognition is independent of experience entirely. A proposition is a priori if it is thought with necessity and is not derived from an empirical proposition. Experience only provides assumed and statistical universality, while strict universality belongs to a judgment necessarily and points to a faculty of a priori cognition. Everyone understands that pure a priori judgments exist in mathematics, but they also exist in the common use of understanding, such as in the proposition that every event must have a cause. Such pure a priori principles are indispensable for the possibility of experience itself. Certain cognitions, like the concepts of God and freedom, go beyond possible experience, and so philosophy requires a science that can establish the principles of knowledge a priori. One way to acquire a priori knowledge is by analyzing concepts we already have, as this produces illuminations of what is already contained in our concepts. But there are actually two different types of judgments, analytic and synthetic. Analytic judgments involve the connection of a predicate concept within a subject concept, while synthetic judgments add a predicate that was not previously thought of. Analytic judgments clarify concepts, while synthetic judgments amplify them. An example of an analytic judgment is, all bodies are extended, while an example of a synthetic judgment is, all bodies are heavy. Analytic judgments can be made without the need for testimony from experience, but synthetic judgments typically require testimony from experience. However, in synthetic a priori judgments, testimony from experience is lacking, and another means of help is needed. The final aim of speculative a priori cognition rests on synthetic principles, which are necessary for attaining new ideas. Mathematical judgments are always a priori and synthetic, meaning they are not based on experience, and they involve the combination of concepts. The principle of non-contradiction cannot provide the basis for mathematical principles, and propositions that appear analytic, such as 7 plus 5 equals 12, are actually synthetic because they require assistance from intuition to be grasped. The same is true for principles of pure geometry. Natural science also contains synthetic a priori principles. For example, the proposition that the quantity of matter remains unaltered in all alterations of the corporeal world, and the proposition that effect and counter-effect must always be equal. Metaphysics aims to go beyond analyzing a priori concepts to expand our knowledge through synthetic a priori cognitions. This requires using principles that add to given concepts and result in propositions that cannot be derived from experience alone. For example, the world must have a first cause. The real problem of pure reason is how synthetic a priori judgments are possible. Metaphysics has not progressed because this problem has not previously been considered, nor was the distinction between analytic and synthetic judgments. The possibility of metaphysics stands or falls on the solution to the problem, as does the possibility of using pure reason to ground all of science. Reason, without critique, leads to groundless assertions or skepticism, while a critique of reason leads to science. Attempts at dogmatic metaphysics are useless because they only analyze a priori concepts without explaining how we attain them. Pure reason is the faculty that provides principles for cognition a priori, and a science of pure reason would be the collection of all those principles, in accordance with which pure a priori cognitions can be acquired. This is what I refer to by a critique of pure reason. Transcendental philosophy is occupied with our mode of cognition of objects a priori. We need a transcendental critique to provide insight into the principles of the synthetic a priori. Such a critique is a preparation for a science, in accordance with which the complete system of the philosophy of pure reason can be exhibited, both analytically and synthetically. Transcendental philosophy is the science outlined by the critique of pure reason, which encompasses all the principles of pure reason. Transcendental philosophy is purely speculative reason, and must not contain anything empirical. The science can be divided into a systematic presentation of concepts, or elements, and a methodology. I refer to these as the doctrine of elements and the doctrine of method. And that brings us to the end of Kant's introductions to the critique of pure reason. In the next video, we shall tackle the first part of the critique, the transcendental aesthetic. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. if you'd like to help this channel reach more people, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.